Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Rabbi. How are you?
Thank you. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so we're starting with Gimel. So it says like this in the tour. Haya imo chamor cheresh veshoteh. Let's say he had with him donkey and a deaf mute and a retard. A katan yanichenu and also child. Yanichenu al a chamor. So the best choice over here is the donkey. Wait, we don't give to the other ones. Kivan shehem adam kimoto. Why? Because they're people like him, humans like him. If it was a choice between deaf mute and retard, give it to retard. Lefish and lo dat, because it doesn't have any intelligence. Kalal at all. And he says, Shoteh katan, what about if it's a retard and a child? Iten lo shoteh, give it to the retard. She'akatan yavo lichlal dat, because the child will eventually come to have intelligence. Okay. Then he says, Cheresh the katan. What about if it's choice deaf mute and a katan as a child? You can give it to whoever you want. That's either one is good. Okay. Okay. Any more loze veloze? What about this? You don't have any of them. So we said, right? Then you got to carry it yourself. Less than 4 amot, then stop every time. So we read this one time, this tour, but just to review it, now we can go back to the Yosef. Okay. So it says over here, the Bet Yosef, he brings the source for this. Hakol pashut sham. Where is this in Shabbat? Kuf nun gimel amud aleph. Uvecheresh v'katan nistabku b'gemara. So it says regarding deaf mute and a katan, there's a doubt in the Gemara. Which one is the right one? Which one is preferred? Some say you should give to the deaf mute, but not to the child. Mishum de'ate lichlal dat, because eventually he'll grow up and become intelligent. Some say the katan right? Give it to a child and not to the cheresh, the deaf mute. Mishum de'ate lechalufe begadol, because they'll come to they'll come to mistake it for adult. Ikech, who's intelligent. כתבו על ריף והראש, says the Rif and the Rosh, since regarding this case, the halacha wasn't paskind, the abad ki hai lishna abad, the abad ki hai lishna abad. So you can do either way, right? You have a choice. There's no really a clear preference there. Rambam, right? Rambam also says this. Katab Sham Rav Magid. Rav Magid says B'Shem Ramban, name Ramban. Rashba also the Rashba. V'Shar Mefarshim and the other commentaries. When he gives it to one of these people, right? You should give it to him, place it on him when he's walking already, like we said regarding the animal. And also take it off when he stands, when he stops. But without this, asur will be forbidden. The lo garam mebehema, because it's not any worse than an animal. The asur liachilo, and he's forbidden to feed him be'adayim with the hands. Rabbeinu satam devarab. So he says the Torah, the paskins been, yeah. So what he's saying is it didn't clearly paskin. So he also seems to hold you can give it to either one. And the reason is because we're not commanding regarding these people. Like we are commanded regarding the rest of the behemton, his animal. Okay. So he says the prohibition is only to feed them. With the hands. Well, if he's there, according to this, he says, when he gives to one of them, one of these people, they should not give it on Shabbat. So it shouldn't be like you're feeding him, actively. Rather, you gotta do it Erev Shabbat. He puts it to give them. Regarding somebody that it got dark, when he was traveling on the road, they were not stringent. He says, nevertheless, could be that he says our rabbi wrote the Gemara in simple manner. Even though he holds like the commentaries. Okay, so that's the end of the Bet Yosef. So we have now here several Shulchan Aruch to do. This is Gimel. So it says, so let's say he has all of them, right, by his side. He's got donkey, deaf mute, retard, and also the child. Which one? So the donkey is the best, right? Because it's not human. So human is worse than donkey. That's what we're saying, right? Don't give them to one of these. So why is the donkey better than the humans? The reason is because all the humans are Jewish, here. So they're commanded, to keep the Torah, more or less, right? Depending on the situation, but right. So it's always better than an animal, which is not really commanded. We're commanded on the animal, but the animal himself is not commanded. It's not the same thing. It's not the same level. So therefore, right, the animal's better. Okay, that's Gimel. Let's go to Dalet. What about if you have choice between, right, the deaf, mute, and retard? We said, right, eternal shoteh. Shoteh is better, the retard. Because he doesn't have intelligence, right? So when we say, right, that it's somebody who's retarded, we're talking about like he really has no intellect at all. That's what we're talking about. Not talking about somebody who's like mildly retarded, or whatever, something like that. We're not talking about that. Fully retarded. Okay. That's Dalid. Let's go to Hey. Then, right, we have Shotev Katan. What about if you have a retard and a child? So the shoteh is better, the retard. Why? Because the child will eventually come, right, to be intelligent. He's just he's going to grow up sooner or later. So why do we care about that? Because he'll remember what he did, and he'll say like, "Hey, what was that? Why did I do this?" Maybe it's allowed to do those things. So we don't really want that. It's bad training for the child. Basically, that's what it is. What about if you have deaf, mute, and katan? This one, as we said, right? There's no preference. You can give it to either one. So why is that? Because in the Gemara they weren't able to answer this question. So it got left as like as a blank. A place it got left blank. No clear answer. No favorite. That's it. Okay, fantastic. So that's that. So now we're going to love. So it says here in the Shulchan Aruch, some say, right, there's an opinion. If you give it to one of these that we spoke about, right, what you should do is place it on him when he's walking, and then, right, take it when he stops. So we already explained, right, beforehand, a couple of days ago, that the reason is because if he starts walking with it, and it's already on him, so that's like you're transgressing the prohibition of mechamer, which is like leading the animal or whatever. So some say that's the way it should be done. So says the Rama, but dafka kishenoten lahem mishechashecha. That's only if you give it to them when it's Shabbat. כשנותן להם מבעוד יום, but if you give them before Shabbat, מותר בכל עניין, then it's allowed in any case. Okay, that's very interesting. So let's see Mishnah Berurah what he says here about this. So yeah, he explains it pretty well. He says like this, right? That the reason is because they shouldn't come to do a Torah prohibition by way of him, because he's leading them like that. So he says, even though, right, this really only applies to the animal, this concept. But he says, nevertheless, right, you shouldn't, actively cause them to transgress. That's interesting. Wow. So therefore, right, you should do it this way. What does that mean? This way? That as we said, right, you wait till he starts walking and place it on him, and don't place it on him when he's stopped, because otherwise you're actively causing him to do it. What does that mean? That you're telling him, okay, let's go, yeah, start walking, proceed. You're actively doing it, telling him to do it. So this resembles, the case of the animal that we spoke about a couple of days ago. All right. Question is, do we paskin this way? Let's see what we can get. So before we get to that question, let's just read the Ramah. He says, "V'dafka k'shenoten lahem mishachashecha." That's only if you gave it to him, right? Yeah, we read this already. Okay, read it. Okay, but anyway. Let me take a peek in the Beit Yosef, see what he says about this. Yeah, actually, he does address it over here. It's very interesting the way he words it. Let me try to explain this to you. It says, so this is the way he says it, Bet Yosef. He says, Katav Sham Rav Magid B'Shem Ramban v'Rashba. So he wrote Rav Magid, named the Ramban Rashba, Yashar Mefarshim, and also other commentaries as well, commentators. כשהוא נותנו לאחד מאלו, when he gives it to one of them, מניחו עליו כשהוא מהלך. He could do it when he's walking, right, as we said, ונותו לו. So there are many authorities who write this, this opinion. כשהוא עומד, לאו הכי אסור, דלא גרע מבהמה ואסור. So otherwise it will be forbidden, because this is not any worse than an animal. It says the same thing, like an animal. ואסור להאכילו בידיים. You're not allowed to do it actively. רבנו סתם דבריו. So he says, but the Torah, right, didn't adopt the words of these rabbis. He didn't really mention this detail that they mentioned. So what does this mean? So it seems like, he holds that you can do it anyway. And the reason is because we're not really commanded, right, to, regarding the rest of these, like we're commanded regarding the animal. So therefore it's only forbidden to actually feed them, actively. ולפי זה כשנותנו לאחד מאלו, אינו נותנו לשבת, שלא יהיה מאכילו בידיים. מערב שבת הוא נותנו להם, אצל מי שחשיך בדרך, ואורך ימי ומקום מקום, רבנו כתב דברי. So then he says, right, he entertains another option, which is that it could be that the Torah, he didn't write this detail that we just mentioned. He just wrote the Gemara clearly, plainly. But it could be that he also holds, right, like those commentaries. So this Rabbeinu that he's talking about here is not, it's talking about the Rambam. Wow. So this is a very borderline case over here, Not really so clear what they're posketing like here. But after thinking about this for a second, my humble opinion that this is not really an obligation. This opinion. There are several reasons I say that. One is because it's Stam Beyesh, Yesh Omrim doesn't really. Usually we don't paskin like that. That's one thing, and also because it wasn't really said, clearly, explicitly by the Rambam, this detail. So apparently, it's not really something which was held by the earlier authorities in the generation of the Rambam. Nobody even mentioned this then. Interesting. So again, right, Shulchan Aruch says, yes, Shomrim, some say like that. Not really an obligation so much. And then the Ramah brings the other detail, right, which was mentioned in the Bet Yosef, which is this only applies during Shabbat, but before Shabbat doesn't apply this detail. So my humble opinion is that this is not the halacha, this thing. What can I tell you? It doesn't seem to me like it is. Okay, anyway, let's move on. Let's go to Zion. So then we said, right, in the Torah, if you don't have any of these, then just, carry it yourself, right? As we said, less than 4 amot each time. So regarding this, the Bet Yosef says, Gam ze sham enimo lo nochri. It says in Gemara like that. If you don't have a goy, no donkey, right? And none of these little tykes, right, that you have coming with you. The little kid, the little thing, this little thing, this little that. All these guys that we mentioned. Amar Yitzchak, od acheret haita. So this rabbi says, right, there was another one, Sham, Belo Ratzu Chachamim Galota. So he says there was also another one. The rabbis didn't want to reveal it. Oh. There's a secret going on here, right? They're keeping secrets behind our back. They didn't want to reveal. There's another one here. Oh, there's another one. So who's that other one? Right? That's the one, right? So which is the other one? It's you yourself, right? You can carry it less than 4 amot. So the rabbis were like reluctant to reveal that because they're afraid, you're going to carry it 4 amot. By the way, they're right because, you can easily count to carry it 4 amot. What are you going to remember every time, to stop? You know what I mean? Let's say you have to travel for, 1 mile, right? Every time you're going to stop, less than 4 amot, you're going to forget. That's why the rabbis didn't want to reveal this to you. So then why did they reveal it to us? That's the case. Right? So you know what the answer is, right? The answer is that even if you did go for amot, right, by mistake, you're still not liable. Why is that? Because you did it by mistake. It was, it wasn't on purpose. You forgot. So there's still something, to justify what you're doing here. Therefore, in the end, right, the rabbis did reveal it, even though they were reluctant to do so. Right? And therefore, bottom line is, right, if you don't have any of the others, right, the other options, this is your final option to do it yourself. Less than 4 amot. All right. Let's move on. Mishum as you said, right? The reason is because they're going to carry it for Amod. We should have been in the public domain. And the Rif and the Rosh wrote this. They had the Rabbi Yitzchak write this. Rabbi Yitzchak. And Gama Rambam Pasaka Beper Kaf also Rambam. Mashma Desirelu. So it implies that they hold they had the Lora Chachamim Legalota. Right? This fact that the rabbis didn't want to reveal it, Dafka Hecha Deika Chamor. That's only if you have another option, right? As we said, you've got your chamor, you got your this, you got that, and cheresh v'shote katan, or these children, whatever. If you don't have any one of them, then we reveal the secret to him. We reveal the secret. דאם לא כן, מאחר שאין אדם מעמיד עצמו על עצמו, עתה לעיתוי 400. So why do we reveal the secret? So he says, you know why? Because as we said right before, people are very excited about their money, If you don't tell them a solution, if you don't give them one, they will definitely come to carry 4 amot, because they're afraid, to leave their money, in the street somewhere, somebody can just steal it. Nobody wants that. Who wants that? Everybody's afraid to do that. So it's a mentality, a person's mentality. They don't want to leave their money in the street. So you better give them a solution, otherwise, there's going to be trouble. That's the whole thing. See, by the way, how much people are fixated on money. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. Okay. So it says, "V'achi mashma midebai b'talmuda." That's the way it implies, because the Talmud asks, "En sham lo nochri ve'lo cheresh v'shote katan." You don't have any one of these, right? Options. What's the rule? Mashma dedato haya shigale. So implies that his intention was to reveal a sort, right? The secret, to reveal the secret. וגם מדחזינן של רבי יצחק גילה אותו, and since we see that this rabbi also revealed that Rabbi Yitzchak משמע דכל אחד דלקח אחד מהנה השארה. So it implies, right, that if you don't have any of these options, it's okay. וכן נראה ממה שכתב Rashi, that's what seems from Rashi, what he wrote, גבי had דאמינן, regarding that which we wrote, that which we said, בו ביום גדשו שאה. ביום שעלו לעליית חנניה וגזרו י"ח דבר וזו אחד מהן. So he says what happened was that there was a certain day, right, where the rabbis gathered, in a certain, right, place which belonged to Hananiah, right, in his attic, whatever. And they made 18 decrees, that day, the rabbis. And this was one of them. Like we said in the first parak, Yuzan Amud Bet, noten kisui lenochri or bayom, right? You give a cover to a goy that day. I'm sorry, I didn't say it right. Noten kiso. He gives his right purse to the goy that day. That on that day they decreed that they shouldn't right walk it. You shouldn't carry it less than 4 amot. If you have a goy there, right? If you have a goy, don't do it. Okay, there you go. Okay, we still got something to go here. We got time. So it says like this. It says this rabbi, right? What you do is, as we said, right, carry less than 4 amot. Because the rabbi said, right, you got to stop every 4 amot. So it says not only that he has to stop, but he also has to sit down as well. Because if he just, stopped and stood, ולא הלך בכל פחות מ400, and he didn't go right less than 400. He's still going to be liable, if he didn't sit down, even if he stopped. Wow. So it says, even though he stopped, right, it's still called one walk if you didn't sit down. Wow. Even the Carmelit, right, which is a quasi public domain, not exactly, or besadeh, right, or in the field, chayav malkot, he's going to be liable to lashes midrabanan from the rabbis because it's not a totally public domain. More sar shalom. This is what this rabbi said. B'tshuva and tshuva. Unconditional. That's the end of it. וכן כתוב בקובו, that's what says קובו, so כתב רמב"ם, says רמב"ם, פרק כ', לא הייתה עמו בהמה, if he doesn't have any animal, ולא נוכרית, no goy, ולא אחד ממקום אלו, not any of these people that we mentioned, מהלך בו פחות מ-400, then we should go less than 400 each time. אפילו מציאה שבא לידו, even if he found something, right, מהלך בה פחות מ-400, you can also walk like less than 400. אבל קודם שתעבור לידו, but before he acquired it though, אם יכול להחשיך עליה מחשיך. If you can stay there overnight, right, and guard it, you should do that. If he's not able to do that, right, it's a little bit uncomfortable there. מוליכו פחות מ-400, then do less than 400 each time. כתב רמגיד שחלקו עליו כל המפרשים. So Ramagid says all the rabbis argued with the Rambam, all the commentaries. ואמרו שכשם שאסור לתיתה לנוכרי, so they said, right, just like you're not allowed to give it to a goy, כך אסור להוליכה גם הוא, he also cannot take it. Zal, okay. Per Hador, right? Mishal al Zeh, he was asked about this, right? Mechachmei Lunil, from the rabbis of Lunil. The Gemara lo mashma hachi. The Gemara doesn't apply like that. Be'eshiv shelo chalku beGemara. So he answers that in the Gemara they didn't really differentiate ben kis lemitziah between a found object and a purse. Leolachat, when it comes to taking it pachot mi-400, less than 400. Okay. Shazeu olachat sin'ah gadola yesh be'ah. So this is because this kind of walking, right? It has, it's very discreet. It doesn't look like very, ugly, suspicious, whatever, right? Unseemly. So he says, that's what I hold. Whoever wants to argue with me can argue with me, he says. But he himself, right, admits that his words are not really, conclusive. Therefore, he says you should try to be restringent like the other commentaries. Interesting. Wow. What about the Ran? כתב תשובת הרמב"ם, he wrote תשובת הרמב"ם, וכתב עליה שאין טעמו מחבר. He also says, right, the reasoning of the Rambam is not so convincing, right, not so conclusive. וכבר השיגו הרב"ד, and the Ravad already argued with him about this. Wow. Okay, long story here. So let's see, right, Shulchan Aruch, what we got. Zayin. So says Shulchan Aruch, im en imo shum echad mikol elu. Which, let's say he doesn't have any of these, right, options that we spoke about, right? Italtelenu pachot mechot me'amarbot. So then you got to carry it less than 400, right? But dafka kiso or metziah. So that's only if it's But if we're talking about a purse, right, or a wallet, whatever, right, or some kind of found object, Shabbat liado, that he acquired, right? What does that mean? Acquired it before Shabbat. But if he didn't acquire it, then you cannot do this. So there's a lot of interesting things here, which meaning to say that in the Bet Yosef we saw, right, that there was an opinion that said that you got to also sit down. It's not enough just to stop. But here he doesn't say that. That's one thing. Another thing. So he says, he mentions this detail also that when it comes to a found object, we're talking about something which he didn't acquire, but he did acquire. Then he's allowed to do this. But if he didn't acquire it yet, he's not allowed to do it. So I'm assuming what he says, right, acquired or not acquired, is talking about acquired on Shabbat. So in other words, if you found it on Shabbat, you can't really acquire it. So therefore, we don't give you this leniency. We already saw this before, right? In a different halacha, same concept. Okay, fine. So we still have a little bit of clarification here to do here. Let's open the Mishnah Berurah. Let's see what he's got here. Oh, so there you go, right? So Mishnah Berurah says, right, according to the Pshat in the Shulchan Aruch, you don't have to sit down. And then he says there is another opinion, right, which says you do have to sit down, as we already saw in the Bet Yosef. So you see from there, right, that in the Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't require you to sit down. Mm-hmm. That's what he's saying. So that other opinion is like a chumrah, by us, because we don't hold by it. Okay, that's one thing. What about the other issue, which was right regarding finding something, right? What are we talking about? So let's just get that clear. I'll look at the Mishnah Berurah. Let's see what it says here. Yeah, so he says, right, it's like we learned before, that it means that you acquired it before Shabbat. But if you found it on Shabbat, it's not really, you can't really acquire it. So the question is like this, right? Why can't you acquire it on Shabbat? What's the problem? Did the rabbis decree, right, you can acquire? Is that what it is? Let's take a look at this for a second. I'm looking at the Bet Yosef to see if he can help us with this. So just to remind us, right, the one who said that you have to sit down was Rabbi Yerucham. So we don't paskin like that, apparently. That's one thing. So you can see right here that the reason why we don't paskin like Rabbi Yerucham, who says you have to sit down, is because the Rambam never mentioned that. He never mentioned you have to sit down. That's one thing. And then so okay, yeah, so it requires some understanding over here, right, regarding this issue, because he brings here the Rambam, and the Rambam's language is like this. If you don't have any of these people, right, the animal, right, the goy, whatever it is, all these things, as we said, right, walk less than 4 amot each time. So the Rambam says like this, even if it's something you found, you can still do this, So apparently, right, the Rambam is lenient regarding that. Even if he found it on Shabbat, he's lenient. So the Rambam says like this: if you can like stay with that item like all night, whatever. In other words, you can wait till the Shabbat goes out. Can you stay there until Shabbat goes out? If you can do that, try to do that. If you can't, so says the Rambam, then you can walk it less than 4 amot each time. But then comes the Rav Magid, right, and says, you know what? The commentaries argued with the Rambam about this issue. They didn't really agree with him. So then the Rambam has a tshuva also regarding this, right? And in the tshuva, he writes that really, the rabbis never differentiated between, right, something in a wallet or a purse or something which you find. So in other words, it's all the same according to Rambam. That's what he's saying, according to the Talmud. So then, right, comes the Rav Magid and says, you know what? Yeah, but all the commentaries, argued with the Rambam about this. They're not really, very comfortable with this psak. Because the Rambam himself was not so confident about this either. That's the language that he has in the tshuva. He's a little bit unsure about it. So therefore, says Rav Magid, you know what? It's better to be stringent with this, because he himself wasn't even so sure about it, the Rambam. And the Ran also argues with the Rambam. So you see, right, that everybody's against the Rambam here. So therefore, right, the final recommendation seems to be, don't be lenient with this. So then what does this mean? Before Shabbat, you can be lenient, right? If you acquired it before Shabbat, it's yours already. That's it. But if you found it on Shabbat, right, and you didn't really acquire it really, so then we tell you, you know what? Don't do this. We recommend you not to do it. That's what it's saying. Okay, so let's take a look at the Shulchan Aruch, right? What did we say? The bottom line was that's how he paskin, right? So he paskins pretty much against the Rambam. That's what it is, because everybody's against him. The consensus is against the Rambam. That's one thing. Now, the only question I have left, to answer is like this, my just simple question. Why is it that you can't acquire something on Shabbat? This is, so let's go back to Seif Aleph, because that's where it is. That old halakha that we learned before. Maybe Mishnah Berurah explains over here what the reason is. So I'm taking a look there. Right. Yeah. So yeah, we did learn this. I remember. It slipped my mind, but I'll just remind you. Right, what we said then. The Mishnah Berurah here brought a reason why the rabbis were not lenient in this case, where he found it on Shabbat. So the thing is, like he says, like this, right? That he doesn't really have a connection with this item since he found it on Shabbat. Why? Because he didn't exert himself, right, regarding this. Therefore, we're not really concerned he's going to carry 4 amot, this item. He's not so attached to it. He hasn't acquired it yet. So therefore, the rabbi said, you know what? In this case, we're not going to allow you to take this thing home. You don't really need this leniency, it's not necessary for you. You're not going to come to carry anybody 4 amot. You're not so attached to this item. So according to this, right, it's not that you cannot acquire something on Shabbat. That's not the issue. It's just that you're not really, attached to it because you haven't acquired it yet before Shabbat. Yeah, that's pretty. It's psychology here, That's pretty much what it is. You're just not attached to this thing yet. What I don't really understand is, so then, okay, so become attached now. In other words, you acquired on Shabbat, and become attached now. For some reason, we don't say that. You're going to become attached now. What we say is that you're just not attached to it because you didn't acquire it before Shabbat. It's a matter of psychology. I'm just going to take one quick look in the Bet Yosef over here, to see if he explains this a little bit better. Let's see what he says. I don't know. This still requires some thought. This whole thing. Not so clear in my head. But Hashem, next time we'll try to sort it out. Which is going to be Sunday, Nevezat Hashem. Before Rosh Hashanah, we have one more night. So thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Hazak Baruch, Leila Tov. And we'll see you hopefully on Sunday, Bezat Hashem, before the holiday, before the new year. Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Leila Tov.
Have a good night.
You too.